So even if we have to wait until March 31st of 2025 to see Nintendo finally officially announce their next generation hardware and get a first look at it, one thing they have to do in the behind the scenes work of the business is mass manufacture and get this unit ready for retail shelves. And that is going to go on in the background months and months in advance from when we actually see Nintendo launch the hardware. And due to some data that has been spotted online from their most recent financial investor briefing, it appears that from Nintendo's own report and looking at their history, that they are in mass manufacturing for Switch 2 as we speak, as you would hope they would be by now, because one, they've said things in the past like their plan to avoid scalping with this next generation console, like we always see with any new hot tech item. Well, they said their plan quite simply for that is just to produce as many units as needed, stockpile them if needed, and essentially come as close as they possibly can to meeting market demand right at launch out of the gate, which does in turn avoid scalping. And the other reason this data is exciting is that even if Nintendo does choose to wait later into 2025, I'm expecting a January or February reveal at this point in time. But even if they do that, we may still have a shot of seeing the console launch in the first half of the year if these numbers are to be believed, and they're from Nintendo themselves. So this is not leak insider talk or anything like that, somebody with a somewhat reliable track record. This all comes from Nintendo's own public reports that they put out there for investors. And yeah, it's a pretty exciting one to go over if you are anticipating Switch 2's ultimate release. But we'll get on the same page with all of this info. Before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here. And we have to first start off by hopping over to Family Boards, where we have a user by FWD-BWD who has outlined the following. And I would also like to give a quick shout out to Twitter user Votlin, who did bring this to my attention, and to friend of the channel Nintendo Prime, because they did make a video kind of outlining this, but now we have some further clarification that just really spell it out in plain terms what Nintendo is doing behind the scenes with their work in progress inventory, which is really the focal point here. So you can first see this post, which reads, Nintendo released this fiscal year's semi-annual report on Friday local time. Something strange about their work in progress inventory level as of 9/30/2024 made me do a double take. To explain it better, I compiled all WIP numbers in the Switch era. Now, WIP is work in progress, and this is work in progress inventory that Nintendo has on hand. We will dive into exactly what that means in a moment, but the thing to note is right at the top of the chart. As of September 2024, the work in progress number is 7,030. Now, you look at the previous years as we continue to go back in time, and there are a couple big spikes that we saw. So one, around the OLED model launch time and around the height of the pandemic when Switches were flying off the shelves left and right. And again, in the same year, but earlier before the Switch Lite launched in 2019, like if Nintendo does a new model or if they're just in a situation where they have to produce a ton of Switches, this is when this number goes up, and you see it where it's at currently as of September 2024 with an all-time record, which would line up with Nintendo's previous comments about what they're doing in terms of trying to fight off scalpers by literally just producing a ton of units, possibly the most in Nintendo history for a console launch. But continuing on down the post where it says, immediately one can see that the work in progress inventory in September was abnormally high, dwarfing even the pandemic-induced high March 2021 and new model pre-release boosts March 2019 for Lite and September 2021 for OLED. It seems to indicate that by the end of September, Nintendo had begun Switch 2 assembly, or at least started processing the Switch 2 materials from their suppliers. I suspect that a presumably higher BOM also contributed to the elevated valuation of the WIP inventory. If the WIP inventory's 9,030% increase versus 6 months ago was in fact due to Switch 2 pre-production, Nintendo may make good their promise to counter scalping through an ample supply. Now, if you still have any questions about that post and the long and short of what it means, here's another more in-depth, detailed breakdown of what this user is saying here, where he says, I was asked offline by a few folks to clarify certain points in my post about Nintendo's 7 billion yen of work in progress inventory, about 44.8 million USD. Since it might be useful to others as well, I'm sharing some answers below. And the first point is, after a part or component from a supplier is in Nintendo's possession, it's counted towards the raw materials inventory. It matters not if the material is in a warehouse, on a cargo ship, or even sitting on a factory floor floor ready to be used, it is still in the raw materials category. When the material is transformed into part of a product and the product isn't completely finished, it is now counted as the work in progress inventory. For example, after Nintendo receives a T239 SoC from Nvidia, it is included in the raw materials. As soon as the chip is mounted on a PCB, it becomes work in progress. Knowing the above, the 7 billion yen of WIP inventory is probably the smoking gun of Switch 2 mass production as of September 30th, 2024. Not only is it the highest WIP in the Switch era, but the amount is close to 2x of the previous high when Switch 1 was selling like hotcakes during the pandemic. Since Alarmo is priced at $99 and its inventory seems low, it likely didn't have much impact on the WIP number. Note that from the number we can only say that some pre-assembly was underway, but it isn't certain that final assembly of a complete retail product had begun in September. As LIC pointed out, September shipping data suggests that Hosiden Vietnam subcontracted some PCB SMT work to a name I'm not going to try to pronounce, a Vietnam manufacturer, and Joy-Con strap work to Matsuoka, Vietnam. It's quite possible that similar pre-assembly had also started in China. I wouldn't be surprised if it was earlier and at a larger scale than what the Vietnamese data indicated. Previously, I posted a few of Nintendo's suppliers' financial reports that offered hints of supplier mass production in Q3. The schedule lines up with pre-assembly in September. Just to be clear, I'm not saying that the final assembly had not commenced in September, only that we have no data to confirm it. A side note, material used in the construction of Nintendo's development building 2 should fall under the capital expenditures, not in the inventory. Okay, so again, obviously, as the end gamers and users here, we want to actually see this console hardware. We want to see what Nintendo's been cooking up this whole time and get a look at what is going to come of the Switch 2. But while Nintendo is just waiting and taking their time to reveal that, this is verifiable data straight from Nintendo's own documents. It's not questionable data. It's not maybe they are working on this stuff behind the scenes. It's actually factually what they are doing right now, which is more or less mass producing the Nintendo Switch 2. It's pointed out that while we can't exactly confirm that the finalized retail product is being mass assembled right now, everything is in place as far as the assembly line goes. And when you see the kind of spike in the work in progress inventory numbers that is happening right now, higher than any point in the Switch's history of their generation, and even higher than the 2016 increase that you saw pre-Switch launch, that suggests Nintendo kind of knows what they have on their hands here with the follow-up console to one that currently has a base of 143 million units sold out there. So, and we've even talked about the slides, like 127 million active Nintendo Switch sign-ins on a Switch per year. Like, they have this massive active user base that is not just picking up their Switch occasionally, but is pretty engaged for the most part. There's going to be a large chunk of those that are just ready to go get the console day one when it does drop, especially with how long it's been. We're talking since March of 2017 into 2025. It will have been for sure over 8 years by time this console launches from when we got the last one. And Nintendo's not in this Wii U situation where they just don't know if they're going to, have a commercial failure again on their hands for the next one or not. They've made it very clear that they're rolling forward Nintendo accounts. They're rolling forward backwards compatibility for the current Switch titles. They're making this more of an incremental transition to new hardware as opposed to just a hard clean break. They're still going to keep releasing select titles for the original Switch because of how successful it was, while creating brand new exclusive games for their next gen console. And to keep true to their words, they're trying to avoid scalping, and they're doing mass manufacturing at a level that we have not seen them do before, which is definitely the right thing to do, because there is nothing worse than being extremely excited for a brand new console, pick it up day one, and then you're sitting there realizing that you cannot find it online anywhere or locally, and you have to turn to scalping prices. You never want to do that, or you never want to feel like that's the only option if you want it day one. And not to say that there won't be zero scalping with the system. I don't think Nintendo could even produce enough day one shelf stock to avoid that entirely, but it might be mitigated vastly where, a couple weeks after the first batch of consoles sell out, we get another restock in shortly there afterwards. Like, they could basically start at a point where they have so many ready to go in the warehouse that once they put out the mass wave of first units, they actually have enough backup units to continue to fill out the supply chain as the consoles being sold over the course of the year. And in terms of tying this back to when we might see Nintendo launch the console, it really does depend on how they're going to stockpile this inventory walking into it, because it would appear from this data that first half of 2025 is more or less a lock. Like, I wouldn't expect you to go any later than June with the kind of information information that we have from Nintendo themselves at this point. But then you also have to realize that Nintendo's Nintendo and they can do stuff they've never done before, and that if they are targeting that more fall or holiday season for next year, maybe they are going to be stockpiling this thing for quite a bit longer, which is a very expensive thing to do, and you really don't want to do it because you're paying for the storage of where all those consoles are sitting if they're not sitting on retail shelves. So I personally believe this is a very good indication of a first half of 2025 release, which is still what I'm hoping for, and I believe it would be a win even with all the waiting and speculation around when will Nintendo finally reveal this thing. If we find out it's first half 2025, I'm good with it. I definitely don't want to wait until holiday season 2025 to get my hands on this next gen console, because I mean the performance issues on even first party Nintendo games is a real problem at this point, and you know, we're talking about 8-year-old hardware here pretty soon. So let me know in the comments down below how you feel about this. Are you thinking that data like this does indeed back up the idea that we should be able to expect this console to be out in the first half of next year? Do you think that Nintendo is indeed going to meet anywhere close to the actual day one demand that will avoid potentially scalping for this upcoming console, where we won't have to be looking at those inflated eBay prices and reseller prices online? And finally, if you had to pick any month as the most likely culprit for when Nintendo will choose to reveal this thing in 2025, because I'm definitely thinking it's happening in 2025 at this point, when do you think it is? So make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave, regardless if we agree or disagree. Also make sure you like, subscribe, turn your notification bell. And with that, I've been Sunbro, you've been Nation. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.